The chandelier's light caught the diamond on her finger, a ring she hadn't put there herself. Lena stood frozen in the center of Blackridge Manor's grand hall, 200 pairs of eyes locked on her face, waiting. Elias Thornfield's hand was still extended, his voice steady as stone. "I didn't bring you here by accident, Lena. I brought you here because you're the only person in this room I've ever wanted." Her chest tightened. She could run. She could laugh it off as some cruel joke. Or she could do the one thing that terrified her most, believe him. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this impossible night actually began. To a morning that started like any other forgettable day, and a girl who'd learned not to expect anything from anyone. If you want to see how a single birthday can rewrite someone's entire life, stay with me until the end. And when you do, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see just how far Lena's story travels. Lena Whitmore woke up to silence. Not the peaceful kind. The heavy kind. The kind that sits on your chest and reminds you that nobody's going to call, nobody's going to knock on the door with flowers, and if you don't acknowledge your own birthday, it'll pass like any other unremarkable Thursday in March. 20 years old today. She stared at the ceiling of her cramped studio apartment, counting the cracks in the plaster. There were 11. She knew because she'd counted them before. Many times. The radiator clanked. The neighbor's dog barked. Somewhere down the hall, a door slammed. Lena rolled onto her side and checked her phone. No messages. She wasn't surprised. Her mother had passed 3 years ago, her father 2 years before that. No siblings. No close friends, really. Not anymore. The people she'd grown up with had scattered after the money dried up, after the Whitmore name stopped meaning anything beyond those people who used to have something. She used to mind. Now she just didn't. Lena pushed herself out of bed, her feet hitting the cold floor. The apartment was small but clean. She kept it that way. Everything in its place. Minimal. Functional. She'd learned to live light because holding on to things, memories, people, hope, only made it hurt worse when they disappeared. She dressed quickly, dark jeans, a plain sweater, boots with a scuff on the toe she'd tried to polish out twice. Then she grabbed her coat and keys, locked the door behind her, and headed to work. The cafe where she worked was tucked between a laundromat and a tax preparation office, the kind of place people passed without noticing. Lena liked it that way. She took orders, made coffee, wiped down tables. The owner, Mrs. Kowalski, didn't ask questions. Lena showed up on time, did the work, went home. "Morning," Mrs. Kowalski grunted from behind the counter as Lena walked in. "Morning. You look tired." "I always look tired," Mrs. Kowalski snorted. "Fair." The day unfolded in its usual rhythm. Regulars came and went, the morning rush, the midday lull, the afternoon pickup. Lena moved through it all on autopilot, her hands steady, her face neutral. Around 2, a woman in a tailored coat ordered a latte and left a $5 tip. Lena pocketed it without comment. Tips like that didn't happen often. "Big spender," muttered Corey, the other barista. He was 19, still in community college, and always broke. "Lucky day, I guess," Lena said. "It's somebody's birthday today," Mrs. Kowalski announced from the back. "Karen in accounting, turning 43. We're doing cake later." Corey groaned. "Do we have to sing?" "Yes." Lena said nothing. She wiped down the espresso machine, her face carefully blank. Nobody here knew it was her birthday. She hadn't told them. Why would she? At 5, her shift ended. She clocked out, pulled her coat tight against the wind, and started the walk home. The city felt colder than usual. Gray sky, gray buildings, gray people hurrying past with their heads down. Lena kept her hands in her pockets and her eyes forward. She used to walk these streets differently. Used to notice things, flowers in window boxes, the way light hit the old church on 5th, the smell of roasted chestnuts from the vendor on the corner. But that was before everything fell apart. Before she learned that noticing things, caring about things, only made their absence more obvious. She stopped at the corner store and bought a frozen dinner, Salisbury steak. It was on sale. "That'll be $4.79, the clerk said, barely looking up. Lena handed over a 5, took the change, and walked out. Back at her apartment, she heated the meal in the microwave, ate it standing at the counter, and washed the plastic tray afterward out of habit. Then she sat on the couch and stared at the wall. This was it. This was her 20th birthday. She thought about texting someone, anyone, just to have a conversation. But who? The few acquaintances she had from work weren't real friends. They didn't know her. Not really. And the people who used to know her, well, they'd moved on. Lena exhaled slowly and picked up her phone anyway. She scrolled through old contacts, stopped on a name, Ivy Harmon. They'd been close once. Best friends? Even. Back when Lena's family still had the house on Maple Street, back when birthday parties meant rented venues and guest lists and ridiculous cakes shaped like castles. But Ivy had stopped answering texts 2 years ago. No fight, no falling out. Just silence. Lena's thumb hovered over the name. Then she put the phone down. Pathetic, she muttered to herself. She stood, paced to the window, looked out at the street below. A couple walked past, laughing about something. A car honked. Life continued, indifferent. She was about to turn away when her phone buzzed. Lena frowned and picked it up. Unknown number. She almost didn't open it. Spam, probably. But something made her tap the screen. The message was short. You are cordially invited to a gathering at Blackridge Manor this evening at 8 p.m. Attire. Formal. A car will arrive at 7:30 to collect you. Lena stared at the screen. Then she read it again. What? Blackridge Manor. She knew the name. Everyone did. It was the Thornfield Estate, a sprawling Gothic mansion on the edge of the city, surrounded by iron gates and old money history. The kind of place people only entered if they were very rich or very important. Lena was neither. This had to be a mistake. She typed a reply. I think you have the wrong number. The response came almost immediately. No mistake, Miss Whitmore. The car will arrive at 7:30. Her heart stuttered. Miss Whitmore. They knew her name. Lena's mind raced. Was this some kind of prank? A scam? But who would go to this much trouble? She checked the time. 6:47 p.m. If a car really was coming at 7:30, she had less than an hour to decide what the hell to do. She sat down hard on the couch, phone still in her hand. This is insane. But also, she looked around her tiny apartment. At the beige walls, the secondhand furniture, the life she'd built out of necessity, not choice. What did she have to lose? At 7:15, Lena was standing in front of her closet, staring at the 3 dresses she owned. One was black, simple, with a modest neckline. She'd worn it to her mother's funeral. One was navy, slightly too big, bought on clearance for a job interview she hadn't gotten. The third was a soft charcoal gray, the nicest of the lot, but still nothing special. She pulled out the gray one and held it up. Formal, the message had said. This wasn't formal. This was adequate. But it would have to do. She changed quickly, her hands trembling slightly. Then she stood in front of the mirror. The girl staring back at her looked nervous, pale, out of place. Lena almost laughed. Out of place. That was the story of her life. At exactly 7:30, there was a knock at the door. Lena's breath caught. She opened it. A man in a dark suit stood in the hallway. He was older, maybe 50, with silver hair and a professional demeanor that suggested he had done this 1,000 times. Miss Whitmore? He asked politely. Yes. I'm here to escort you to Blackridge Manor. The car is waiting. Lena glanced past him. Sure enough, a sleek black car idled at the curb below. I don't understand, she said. Why am I being invited? The man's expression didn't shift. I'm not at liberty to say, miss, but I can assure you your presence is expected. Expected. Not wanted, not requested. Expected. Lena grabbed her coat and followed him downstairs. The car was warm inside, the leather seats soft and expensive. The driver said nothing as they pulled into traffic, heading toward the north side of the city. Lena sat stiffly, her hands folded in her lap, watching the streets blur past. What am I doing? 20 minutes later, they turned onto a private road lined with trees. The headlights illuminated a massive iron gate which swung open as they approached. Blackridge Manor rose ahead like something out of a dream, or a nightmare depending on your perspective. Stone walls, arched windows, towers that disappeared into the night sky. Lights glowed from within, warm and golden. The car stopped at the entrance. The driver came around and opened her door. Enjoy your evening, miss. Lena stepped out onto the gravel driveway, her breath visible in the cold air. The front doors opened. A woman in an elegant gown appeared, smiling. Miss Whitmore, welcome. Please, come in. Lena climbed the steps, her heart pounding. Inside, the grand hall was breathtaking. Chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceiling, crystal catching the light and scattering it in 1,000 directions. A live orchestra played softly in the corner. Guests moved through the space in gowns and tailored suits, holding champagne flutes, laughing in clusters. And every single one of them turned to look at her as she entered. Lena froze. The conversations didn't stop exactly, but they shifted, lowered, eyes lingered. She suddenly felt very, very small. A server approached with a tray of champagne. "Miss?" "No, thank you," Lena managed. She moved deeper into the room, trying to blend in, but it was impossible. Her dress was wrong. Her shoes were wrong. Everything about her screamed, "Doesn't belong." Then she saw him. Across the hall, standing near the fireplace, was a man she recognized from newspapers and social pages, Elias Thornfield, the Duke of Blackridge. He was tall, dark-haired, with sharp features and an air of controlled authority. He didn't smile often, from what Lena had heard. Didn't need to. People bent to his will regardless. And right now, he was looking directly at her. Lena's stomach dropped. He didn't look away. Instead, he handed his glass to someone nearby and started walking toward her. The crowd parted. Lena's pulse hammered in her ears. He stopped in front of her, his expression unreadable. "Miss Whitmore," he said quietly. His voice was low, steady. "I'm glad you came." Lena blinked. I'm sorry. I think there's been a mistake. There's no mistake." She stared at him. Elias extended a hand. "Would you walk with me?" It wasn't really a question. Lena hesitated, then placed her hand in his. His grip was firm, warm. He led her away from the crowd, through a side door and into a quieter corridor lined with portraits. When they were alone, he stopped and turned to face her. "I know you're confused," he said. "That's an understatement." A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You don't remember me, do you?" Lena frowned. "Should I? We met once, years ago. You were, 15, 16? Your family hosted a charity gala. I attended with my father." Lena searched her memory. A gala. There had been so many back then, all blurring together. "You spilled wine on my jacket," Elias said. Her eyes widened. "Oh my God." "You apologized 6 times, offered to pay for the cleaning, even though you couldn't have been more than a teenager." Lena's face flushed. "I was so mortified." "You were kind," he corrected. "Most people in that room wouldn't have bothered." She didn't know what to say. "I've thought about you," Elias continued, his gaze steady. "More than I probably should have. And when I heard what happened to your family, I wanted to reach out, but I didn't know how." Lena's throat tightened. "Why now?" "Because tonight is your birthday." The words hit her like a physical blow. How did you—" "I remembered," he said simply. Lena felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back furiously. "You threw a party for me. I wanted you to have a night where you didn't feel invisible." She let out a shaky breath. "I don't understand. You don't even know me." "I'd like to." The honesty in his voice unraveled something inside her. "I don't belong here," Lena whispered. "You belong wherever you choose to be." They stood there in the quiet hallway, the distant sound of music drifting through the walls. Elias took a step closer. "Come back inside with me. Let me introduce you properly. Not as a guest, as someone I care about." Lena's heart was racing again, but this time it wasn't from fear. "Okay," she heard herself say. Elias offered his arm, and together they walked back into the light. When they stepped back into the grand hall, the music seemed louder, the lights brighter. Lena's hand rested in the crook of Elias's arm, and she could feel the weight of every gaze that turned their way. "Breathe," Elias murmured, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "I am breathing." "You're holding your breath." He was right. She exhaled shakily and forced her shoulders to relax. They moved through the crowd, and Lena noticed something strange. People weren't just staring. They were smiling, not the polite, empty kind, real smiles, like they'd been waiting for her. A woman in a silver gown approached, her face warm. "Miss Whitmore, what a pleasure. I'm Margaret Ashford. Elias has spoken of you. Lena blinked. He has? Only in the most glowing terms, Margaret said, glancing at Elias with obvious amusement. He's been insufferable about tonight. Elias's jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't deny it. Thank you, Lena managed, unsure what else to say. Margaret touched her arm gently. Enjoy yourself, dear. You deserve it. As Margaret glided away, Lena turned to Elias. What did she mean, you've been insufferable? She exaggerates. Elias, he sighed, I may have mentioned tonight's gathering more than once. How many times? I didn't count. How many? A pause. Frequently. Despite herself, Lena felt a small smile pull at her lips. They continued deeper into the room, and Elias introduced her to more people. Business associates, old family friends, a cousin visiting from abroad. Each greeted her with the same warmth, the same genuine interest. It was disorienting. Lena had spent so long being invisible that being seen felt almost painful. Are you hungry? Elias asked after the fifth introduction. A little. He guided her toward a long table laden with food, tiny pastries, roasted meats, fruit arranged like art. Lena's frozen dinner felt like a lifetime ago. She picked up a small plate, selecting a few items carefully. Elias did the same, though she noticed he barely touched anything. You're not eating, she said. I'm not hungry. Then why did you get a plate? So you wouldn't feel self-conscious. The honesty of it caught her off guard. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the tension in his posture, the careful control in every movement. He was nervous. She realized it suddenly, and it made him feel less like an untouchable duke and more like a person. Thank you, she said quietly. He met her eyes. For what? For this. All of it. I don't know why you did it, but thank you. Something shifted in his expression, softened. You don't need to thank me, Lena. It was the first time he'd used her first name without the formal Miss Whitmore attached, and the sound of it sent a strange warmth through her chest. They found a quieter corner near the windows, away from the bulk of the crowd. Lena set her plate down on a side table and looked out at the grounds. The gardens were lit with lanterns, their glow reflecting off the frost-covered hedges. It's beautiful, she said. It's cold and impractical, Elias replied. But yes, beautiful. Lena glanced at him. You don't like your own home? I didn't say that. I just don't romanticize it the way others do. Why not? He was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. When you grow up in a place like this, it stops being a home. It becomes a responsibility, a symbol, something you have to maintain, protect, uphold. He paused. It's lonely. Lena understood that more than he probably realized. I know what that's like, she said. Feeling like you're just going through the motions, playing a part. Elias turned to her, his dark eyes searching hers. Is that what you've been doing? For a while now, yeah. And tonight? She hesitated. Tonight feels different. Good, he said softly. That's what I wanted. Before she could respond, a voice interrupted. Elias, there you are. They both turned. A man approached, tall, blonde, with the kind of easy confidence that came from never being told no. He wore an expensive suit and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Julian, Elias said, his tone noticeably cooler. Julian's gaze slid to Lena, assessing. And who is this? Lena Whitmore, Elias said before she could answer. Lena, this is Julian Cross. Julian extended a hand. Lena shook it briefly, uncomfortable under his scrutiny. Whitmore, Julian repeated, as if tasting the name. Any relation to the Whitmores of Maple Street? Lena's stomach tightened. Yes. Ah. His smile sharpened. I heard about your family's misfortunes. Tragic, really. Julian, Elias said, a warning edge in his voice. What? I'm only expressing sympathy. Julian turned back to Lena. It must be strange being here. Back in this world, I mean. After everything. Lena's face burned. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor. Elias stepped between them, his posture rigid. That's enough. Julian raised his hands in mock surrender. Easy, cousin. I didn't mean to offend. Yes, you did. Touchy. Julian's gaze flicked to Lena again. Well, enjoy the party, Miss Whitmore. I'm sure it's quite the novelty for you. He walked away, leaving a cold silence in his wake. Lena felt her hands trembling. She crossed her arms to hide it. I'm sorry, Elias said, his voice low and furious. He had no right. He's not wrong. Lena, I don't belong here, Elias. You know it. He knows it. Everyone in this room knows it. She laughed bitterly. I'm wearing a dress I bought on clearance. I took the bus to work this morning. She gestured around the room. This isn't my life. It could be. The words hung between them, heavy and impossible. Lena shook her head. You don't know me, not really. You remember a girl who spilled wine on you 5 years ago. That's not the same as knowing someone. Then let me know you. Why? The question came out sharper than she intended. Why do you care? Elias exhaled slowly, his jaw tight. Because when I saw you that night, you looked at me like I was just a person. Not a title, not a name, just someone. And I haven't been able to forget it. Lena stared at him, her heart pounding. Everyone in my life wants something from me, he continued. Power, access, money. But you didn't even recognize me tonight. You didn't come here expecting anything. And that's rare. So this is about novelty, Lena said, hating the bitterness in her voice. I'm interesting because I'm different. No. Elias's voice was firm. You're interesting because you're you. She wanted to believe him, desperately, but belief was dangerous, hope was dangerous. I should go, she said quietly. Lena, I don't fit here, Elias, and pretending I do isn't going to change that. She turned to leave, but he caught her wrist. Not hard, just enough to stop her. Please, he said, don't go, not yet. She looked back at him, and the raw honesty in his expression nearly broke her. I'm scared, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Of what? Of this. Of you. Of believing that this is real, and then… She trailed off. And then what? And then losing it. Elias's grip on her wrist loosened, but he didn't let go. I can't promise you won't get hurt. I can't promise this will be easy. But I can promise I'm not playing games. This, tonight, it's not a whim. It's not pity. It's because I see you, Lena, and I want you to stay. The music swelled in the background, violins and cellos weaving together into something achingly beautiful. Lena closed her eyes, fighting the sting of tears. One dance, she said finally. Elias's breath hitched. What? One dance, and then I'll decide. He smiled, really smiled, and it transformed his entire face. Deal. He led her to the center of the hall, where other couples had begun to gather. The orchestra shifted into a waltz, slow and sweeping. Elias's hand settled on her waist, and Lena placed hers on his shoulder. They began to move, and despite her lack of practice, despite the anxiety thrumming through her veins, it felt right. You're good at this, she said. I've had lessons since I was 6. Of course you have. You're not bad yourself. I'm faking it. You're doing better than you think. They turned in slow circles, the room spinning around them in a blur of light and color. Lena found herself relaxing into the rhythm, into the steadiness of Elias's lead. Can I ask you something? She said. Anything. Why tonight? Why my birthday? Elias hesitated, his expression growing serious. Because I know what it's like to feel forgotten, and I didn't want you to spend another year feeling that way. Her throat tightened. You barely know me. I know enough. They danced in silence for a moment, and then Lena said, I didn't think anyone remembered. I did. The simple certainty of it undid her. The music began to slow, the final notes drifting through the air. Elias guided them to a stop, but he didn't let go. Lena, he said quietly. She looked up at him. I need to tell you something. Her pulse quickened. What? He glanced around the room, then back at her. Not here. Come with me. He took her hand and led her out of the hall, through another corridor and up a flight of stairs. Lena's heart hammered as they climbed, her mind racing with possibilities. They emerged onto a balcony overlooking the gardens. The cold air hit her immediately, but Elias shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders before she could protest. "What are we doing up here?" she asked. Elias turned to face her, his expression more vulnerable than she'd ever seen it. "I brought you here because I needed to say this away from everyone else. Away from expectations." "Say what?" He took a breath. "I didn't just throw this party because I remembered your birthday. I did it because I've been looking for you." Lena frowned. "Looking for me?" "For 2 years. Since I found out what happened to your family. I hired investigators, followed leads, tried to track you down, but you'd disappeared. Changed your name on social media, moved apartments, cut ties. It was like you didn't want to be found." "I didn't," she whispered. "I know, and I respect that. But when I finally located you 3 months ago, I couldn't just walk up to you. I didn't know how you'd react, if you'd even want to see me. So you planned a party. I planned a night where you'd feel like you mattered, where someone was paying attention." He stepped closer. "Because you do matter, Lena, to me." She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. "This is crazy," she said. "I know. You don't do things like this. People don't—" "I don't care what people do." His voice was fierce now. "I care about you. And I know that sounds insane because we've spent maybe an hour together total in our entire lives, but it's the truth." Lena shook her head, overwhelmed. "Elias, You don't have to say anything," he interrupted. "I just needed you to know. Whatever you decide, stay, leave, never speak to me again. I needed you to know that you're not invisible. Not to me." The tears she'd been fighting finally spilled over. She wiped at them furiously, embarrassed. "Hey," Elias said gently, reaching out to brush a tear from her cheek. "It's okay." "It's not okay. I'm a mess." "You're human." She laughed wetly. "I don't know what to do with this. With you. You don't have to do anything. Just let yourself believe it, even if it's just for tonight." Lena looked up at him, at the raw honesty in his eyes, and something inside her shifted, cracked open. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay? I'll stay. For tonight." Elias exhaled, relief washing over his face. "Thank you." They stood there in the cold, Lena wrapped in his jacket, the distant sound of music drifting up from below. "We should go back inside," Elias said eventually, "before you freeze." "In a minute," he smiled. "All right. A minute." But as they stood there, something changed. The air grew heavier, charged with an unspoken tension. Elias's gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. "Lena." She knew what he was asking, and she knew she should pull away, protect herself, keep the distance that had kept her safe for so long. But she didn't. Instead, she closed the space between them and kissed him. It was brief, tentative, terrifying. But when she pulled back, Elias's expression had shifted into something raw and unguarded. Lena started, but he didn't let her finish. He kissed her again, deeper this time, his hands framing her face like she was something precious. And for the first time in years, Lena let herself feel it, the hope, the possibility, the terrifying, exhilarating reality that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone anymore. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Elias rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he whispered. "Not just tonight. Stay." And standing there, wrapped in his jacket, his warmth, his impossible belief in her, Lena realized she wanted to. But before she could answer, a voice called from the doorway behind them. "Elias!" They both turned. Julian stood in the entrance to the balcony, his expression cold and calculating. "The guests are asking for you," he said. "Both of you." There was something in his tone, something sharp and deliberate, that made Lena's stomach drop. Elias's hand tightened around hers. "We'll be down in a moment." "I think you'll want to come now," Julian said. His smile was thin, cruel. "Your little secret is out." Lena's blood went cold. "What secret?" Julian's smile widened. "Come see for yourself." Elias moved first, releasing Lena's hand and stepping toward his cousin with controlled fury. "What did you do?" "Me? Nothing." Julian's tone was mockingly innocent. "I simply shared some interesting information with a few curious guests. You know how people talk at these things." "Julian, I swear to—" "You should really come downstairs, cousin. before things get uncomfortable. Elias's jaw clenched so hard Lena heard his teeth grind. He turned back to her, his expression torn between rage and something that looked like fear. Stay here. No. Lena's voice was steadier than she felt. Whatever this is, I'm not hiding from it. Lena, I'm not hiding. For a moment, Elias looked like he wanted to argue. Then he nodded once, sharply, and took her hand again. Together then. They followed Julian down the stairs, and with each step, Lena's dread grew heavier. The warm, welcoming atmosphere from earlier had shifted. She could feel it before they even entered the hall, the change in the air, the tension crackling like static. When they walked through the doorway, the conversations didn't just pause. They stopped completely. Every face turned toward them. Lena's grip on Elias's hand tightened. Margaret Ashford stood near the fireplace, her earlier warmth replaced by confusion. An older gentleman Lena hadn't met was whispering urgently to the woman beside him. Others stared with expressions ranging from shock to barely concealed disgust. And in the center of it all stood a woman Lena recognized instantly, even though they'd never met. Victoria Pemberton. Tall, elegant, draped in emerald silk that probably cost more than Lena made in 6 months. She was the kind of woman who commanded attention without asking for it, who moved through rooms like she owned them, because in most cases, she did. She was also, according to every society page Lena had ever seen, Elias's intended match, the woman everyone expected him to marry. Victoria's cool gaze swept over Lena with surgical precision, cataloging every flaw, every inadequacy. Then she turned to Elias. So, Victoria said, her voice carrying effortlessly across the silent room. This is her. Elias's posture went rigid. Victoria, I didn't know you were coming. Julian was kind enough to extend an invitation. She glanced at Julian, who raised his champagne glass in a mock toast. He thought I should see what you've been planning. This doesn't concern you, doesn't it? Victoria's smile was sharp as glass. You throw an elaborate party for a girl from a disgraced family, parade her around like she belongs here. And you think that doesn't concern me? Lena felt the words like physical blows. Disgraced, parade, like she belongs. Careful, Elias said, his voice dangerously quiet. Victoria ignored him, her attention fixed on Lena. Tell me, Miss Whitmore, do you know what happened to your father's business? Lena's throat constricted. I know he made mistakes. Mistakes, Victoria laughed, the sound devoid of humor. Is that what you call embezzlement? Fraud? Stealing from investors who trusted him? That's enough, Elias snapped. Oh, I'm just getting started. Victoria took a step closer to Lena, her eyes glittering with something cruel. Did you know that my family lost nearly $2 million because of your father's schemes? That we weren't the only ones? Dozens of families, Elias's included, lost everything they'd invested. Lena felt the room tilt. She knew her family had fallen. She knew there had been scandal, but this? I didn't know, she whispered. Of course you didn't. You were too busy playing the tragic orphan to care about the damage your family caused. Victoria, stop. Elias moved between them, his body a wall of protection. Her father's crimes are not hers. Aren't they? Victoria's voice rose. She benefits from the life he built with stolen money. She lived in luxury while our families bled. And now you bring her here, dress her up, pretend she's one of us? It's insulting. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Lena felt every eye on her, every judgment, every condemnation. I didn't ask for this, Lena said, her voice shaking. I didn't ask to be here. Then why did you come? Victoria demanded. What did you think would happen? That you'd waltz back into society on the arm of a duke and everyone would just forget? I don't want... She came because I asked her to, Elias cut in, his voice like iron. Because I wanted her here. And what my family lost has nothing to do with her. Your family? Victoria's laugh was bitter. Your family lost $300,000, Elias. Your father nearly had to sell the East Wing to cover the losses. And you're defending her? I'm defending an innocent person from being crucified for someone else's sins. She's not innocent. She's a Whitmore. She's Lena, Elias said fiercely. And I won't stand here and let you destroy her because you're angry at a dead man. The room went deathly silent. Victoria's expression hardened. You're choosing her. Yes. Over your family's honor, over your responsibility, over... She paused, something flickering in her eyes that might have been pain. Over me. Elias's voice softened slightly, but his resolve didn't waver. There was never an us, Victoria, you know that. Our families had an understanding. An understanding I never agreed to. Victoria's composure cracked, just for a moment. I see. She straightened, smoothing her dress. Well, I hope she's worth it, Elias, because after tonight your reputation will be as ruined as hers. She swept past them toward the exit, and half the guests moved to follow her. The exodus was immediate and brutal. Men and women who'd greeted Lena with smiles an hour ago now refused to meet her eyes as they filed out. Margaret Ashford paused as she passed, touching Elias's arm gently. I'm sorry, she said quietly, but you know how this looks. I know exactly how it looks, Elias replied, and I don't care. Margaret sighed and continued out. Within 5 minutes, the hall had emptied by more than half. Those who remained were either too loyal to Elias to leave or too curious to miss what happened next. Julian leaned against the wall near the door, watching the chaos with obvious satisfaction. Well, he said, that went about as well as expected. Elias crossed the room in 3 strides and grabbed Julian by his collar. Get out of my house. Julian didn't resist, but his smirk never faltered. Gladly. Though I have to say, cousin, this was even more entertaining than I'd hoped. Why? Elias's voice was low, lethal. Why do this? Because you've always gotten everything, Julian said, his mask slipping to reveal genuine bitterness beneath. The title, the fortune, the respect. And you throw it away on her? Someone who doesn't even belong in your world? He shook his head. You needed to be reminded what happens when you make stupid choices. Elias shoved him toward the door. Leave, now. Julian straightened his jacket, his smirk returning. Give my regards to your father when you explain this disaster to him. He left, and the door closed behind him with a heavy thud. The remaining guests stood in awkward silence, unsure whether to stay or go. Elias turned back to the room, his expression carved from stone. Anyone else have something to say? No one moved. Then I suggest you leave as well. It took less than a minute for the hall to empty completely. When the last guest had gone, Elias stood in the center of the vast, now silent room, his shoulders tense, his breathing heavy. Lena hadn't moved from where she'd frozen near the fireplace. She felt numb, hollowed out. Elias, she said quietly. He turned to her, and the anguish in his eyes nearly broke her. I'm sorry, he said hoarsely. I'm so sorry. I should have anticipated. I should have protected you from... It's not your fault. It is. I brought you here. I put you in the line of fire. Lena shook her head. You didn't know Julian would... I should have. He ran a hand through his hair, destroying the careful styling. I should have seen it coming. He's always hated me, always resented everything I have, and I handed him the perfect weapon. Me. Elias flinched. That's not what I meant. But it's true. Lena's voice was steady now, resigned. I'm a liability. To you, to your reputation. Victoria was right about that much. Victoria is a vindictive... She's not wrong, though. Lena took a shaky breath. My father destroyed people's lives, stole from them, and I had no idea. I was living off that money, Elias, benefiting from it while families like yours suffered. You were a child. I was old enough to notice things weren't right, old enough to see my father's paranoia, his late-night calls, the way he'd snap at my mother. She laughed bitterly. But I didn't want to know, so I didn't ask. Lena, I should go. No, this was a mistake. Tonight, all of it. You trying to give me something I don't deserve. Elias crossed to her in 2 strides and grabbed her shoulders. Not roughly, but firmly enough to make her look at him. Stop. Just stop. Elias, you're not responsible for what your father did. You're not defined by his crimes, and you sure as hell don't deserve to be punished for them for the rest of your life. Tears blurred Lena's vision. But your reputation, screw my reputation. Your family, will get over it or they won't. I don't care. You should care. The words burst out of her, raw and desperate. You have responsibilities, a legacy. You can't just throw it all away for someone like me. Someone like you, Elias repeated slowly. You mean someone brave enough to rebuild their life from nothing? Someone who works 2 jobs and still shows kindness to strangers? Someone who walked into this room tonight scared out of their mind, but did it anyway? I'm not brave. I'm a coward. I've been hiding for years. You're here, aren't you? Standing in the wreckage of what just happened? And still standing? His grip on her shoulders gentled. That's not cowardice, Lena. That's strength. She wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly it hurt. What happens now? She whispered. Elias exhaled slowly, releasing her shoulders but taking her hands instead. Now we figure it out. Together. They'll destroy you. Let them try. Elias, I've spent my entire life doing what was expected of me, following rules, maintaining appearances, being the perfect duke, the perfect heir, the perfect everything. His voice grew fiercer. And I'm tired, Lena. I'm tired of pretending, of feeling nothing, of going through the motions. So I'm what? Your rebellion? You're the first real thing I've felt in years. He pulled her closer, his eyes blazing. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How terrifying and exhilarating and necessary? Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. This is insane. I know. We barely know each other. I know that too. So why? Because when I'm with you, I feel like I can breathe. His voice broke slightly, and I'm not letting that go. Not because of Julian, not because of Victoria, not because of anyone. The raw honesty in his words stripped away her defenses, leaving her vulnerable and exposed. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I. What if this doesn't work? What if it does? They stood there, hands clasped, the empty hall echoing around them. Slowly, Lena became aware of another sound. Footsteps, approaching from one of the side corridors. Elias heard it too. He tensed, turning toward the source. A man emerged from the shadows, older, distinguished, with silver hair and features that looked eerily similar to Elias's. Lena's stomach dropped. Father, Elias said, his voice carefully neutral. The Duke of Blackridge, the actual senior duke, stopped a few feet away, his gaze moving between his son and Lena with an expression that was impossible to read. I heard what happened, he said finally. His voice was measured, controlled. The entire household heard what happened. Then you know why I did it, Elias replied. Do I? The elder Thornfield's attention fixed on Lena. Miss Whitmore, I presume. Lena tried to curtsy and nearly stumbled. Your Grace, you're Robert Whitmore's daughter. It wasn't a question. Lena nodded anyway, her mouth too dry to speak. Your father stole a considerable sum from my family. I know, I'm sorry, I had no idea. He held up a hand, silencing her. Then he turned back to Elias. And you thought bringing her here was wise? I thought giving her a night where she felt valued was the right thing to do, Elias said evenly. At what cost? Whatever it takes. The elder duke's jaw tightened. You've embarrassed this family. I've made a choice. A foolish one. My choice nonetheless. They stared at each other, the tension thick enough to cut. Finally, the elder duke spoke again. Victoria Pemberton is furious. Her family is furious. They're already spreading word of tonight's spectacle. By morning, every social circle in the city will know what you've done. Good, Elias said flatly. Let them know. Elias, I'm not apologizing for this, Father. Not to you, not to Victoria, not to anyone. The elder duke's expression hardened. Then you leave me no choice. Lena's heart stopped. If you pursue this, if you continue to associate with Miss Whitmore publicly, I will have no option but to reconsider your position as heir. The words landed like a bomb. Elias went very still. You're threatening to disinherit me. I'm telling you the consequences of your actions. Because I refuse to bow to social pressure? Because you refuse to think about anyone but yourself. The elder duke's composure cracked, anger bleeding through. This family has a reputation to uphold, responsibilities, obligations that extend far beyond your personal feelings. I'm aware of my responsibilities. Are you? Because from where I stand, you're behaving like a lovesick fool willing to destroy everything we've built for a girl you barely know. Lena flinched at the harshness of it, but Elias didn't waver. You're right, he said quietly. I barely know her, but I know enough to choose her over a life that feels like a prison. The elder Duke's face went red. You ungrateful. I'm grateful for everything you've given me. The education, the opportunities, the legacy. Elias's voice was steady, final. But I won't sacrifice my chance at something real to preserve a facade. Then you're a fool. Maybe. Elias glanced at Lena, and something in his expression softened. But I'd rather be a fool who's happy than a duke who's empty. The silence that followed was suffocating. The elder duke looked between them one more time, his expression a mixture of anger, disappointment, and something that might have been grief. You have until morning to reconsider, he said finally. After that, I'll make arrangements to transfer the title to your brother. I don't have a brother. You have a cousin. Julian would be more than willing. Julian is the one who orchestrated this disaster. And yet he understands duty, loyalty, things you seem to have forgotten. With that, the elder duke turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the empty hall until they faded completely. Elias stood frozen, his face pale. Lena's hands were shaking. Elias, Don't, he said quietly. Don't apologize. This isn't your fault. He's going to disinherit you because of me. Because of his pride, not you. You should take the deal. End this. Tell him you'll... No. Elias, you can't lose everything. He turned to her, his eyes fierce. I already lost everything that mattered, Lena, years ago, before I ever met you. I lost it to duty and expectation and the crushing weight of being what everyone else needed me to be. He took her face in his hands. But tonight, for the first time in my life, I feel like I found something worth fighting for. Lena's tears spilled over. You don't even know if this will work. If we'll work. I don't. But I'd rather risk everything on a chance with you than spend the rest of my life wondering what if. She wanted to tell him he was crazy, that this was too much, too fast, too dangerous. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, she kissed him. It was desperate and messy and tasted like salt from her tears, but it was real. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Elias rested his forehead against hers. What do we do now? Lena whispered. Before he could answer, there was a crash from somewhere deeper in the manor, glass shattering, followed by shouting. Elias's head snapped up. What? Another crash, closer this time. They ran toward the sound, bursting through a set of double doors into what looked like a library. Julian stood in the center of the room, surrounded by broken glass and scattered books. He was drunk. That much was obvious from the way he swayed, and furious. There you are, he slurred, pointing at Elias. The golden boy, the perfect duke. Julian, what are you doing? What am I doing? What are you doing? Throwing away your birthright for some... Finish that sentence and I will end you, Elias warned. Julian laughed wildly. You think you're so noble, so righteous, but you're just selfish. You always have been. Get out of my house. Your house. For how much longer? Julian's grin was vicious. Your father's already talking to my father about the transfer. By tomorrow, this could all be mine. Then take it, Elias said coldly. Take the title. Take the house. Take all of it. I don't care. Julian's face twisted with rage. You don't care? Do you have any idea what I would have done for this? What I've sacrificed? And you just throw it away like it's nothing. He grabbed a heavy crystal decanter from a nearby table and hurled it. Elias shoved Lena aside as the decanter exploded against the wall where her head had been moments before. Are you insane? Elias roared. Julian grabbed another object, a brass bookend, and Lena saw murder in his eyes. Everything slowed down. Julian drew his arm back. Elias lunged forward, and Lena realized with perfect, terrible clarity that someone was about to get hurt. The bookend never left Julian's hand. Elias slammed into him before he could throw it, and both men crashed into a bookshelf. The impact sent volumes tumbling, dust exploding into the air. Julian swung wildly, his fist catching Elias's jaw with a sickening crack. Stop! Lena screamed, but neither man heard her. They grappled, knocking over a lamp, sending a side table skidding across the floor. Julian was drunk and reckless, but Elias was controlled fury, every movement precise, calculated to subdue rather than destroy. You always get everything, Julian snarled, struggling against Elias's grip. Everything handed to you while the rest of us grovel for scraps. I never asked for any of it, Elias growled, forcing Julian's arms behind his back. Liar, you loved being the golden son, the chosen heir, looking down at everyone else. I hated it, Elias said, and the raw honesty in his voice made Julian go still. Every second of it, the pressure, the expectations, being treated like a symbol instead of a person. Julian twisted free, stumbling backward. His face was flushed, his breathing ragged. Then why hold on to it? Why not just walk away? I am walking away. The words hung in the air, heavy with finality. Julian stared at him, confusion cutting through the alcohol and rage. What? You heard me. Elias straightened, wiping blood from his split lip. You want the title? Take it. You want this house, this legacy, this prison? It's yours. You're bluffing. I'm not. Elias's voice was steady, certain. I meant what I said to my father. I choose her. I choose a life that's mine. And if that means giving up everything else, so be it. Julian's expression shifted through several emotions. Disbelief, suspicion, then something that looked dangerously like triumph. You're serious? Completely. Then you're an even bigger fool than I thought. Julian grabbed the wall to steady himself, his earlier violence deflating into something closer to pity. You think she's worth it? That girl whose father destroyed half the families in this city? Yes, she'll leave you. When the money runs out, when reality sets in, she'll realize what you gave up, and she'll leave. Lena had been silent through the fight, frozen by shock and fear. But those words unlocked something inside her, a white-hot anger that burned away the paralysis. You don't know anything about me, she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Both men turned to look at her. She stepped forward, her hands clenched into fists. You think I came here for money, for status? I didn't even want to come. I was perfectly fine in my tiny apartment, working my shifts, living my quiet life. Then why did you? Julian demanded. Because he asked. Because for the first time in years, someone looked at me like I mattered. She turned to Elias, her voice softening but losing none of its strength. And I don't care about your title. I don't care about this house, or your family's name, or any of it. I care about you. Elias's expression cracked open, vulnerable and raw. Julian made a disgusted noise. How touching. You want to know what's touching? Lena wheeled back on him. A man who's had everything handed to him his entire life, finally finding something real and choosing it over comfort. That's brave. What you're doing, throwing a tantrum because you're jealous, that's pathetic. Julian's face went red. You have no right. I have every right. You tried to ruin this night. You brought Victoria here to humiliate me. You told everyone about my father to destroy whatever chance I had at being accepted. Her voice rose. You wanted to hurt Elias by hurting me. Well, congratulations. You did. But you know what you didn't do? You didn't break us. The library door burst open. The elder Duke of Blackridge stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 security guards. His gaze swept the destroyed room, the broken glass, the overturned furniture, his son's bleeding lip, his nephew's drunken disarray. What in hell is going on here? Julian straightened, smoothing his jacket in a futile attempt at dignity. Uncle, I was just destroying my library while intoxicated. The elder Duke's voice could have cut steel. I heard the shouting from 3 corridors away. He attacked me, Julian tried. That's not what it looked like when I watched from the hallway. The Duke's attention shifted to Elias. Are you all right? Elias touched his split lip gingerly. I'm fine. And you, Miss Whitmore? Lena was surprised to be addressed directly. Yes, I'm fine. The elder Duke nodded once, then turned to the guards. Escort Mr. Cross from the premises. He's no longer welcome here. What? Julian's face went white. You can't! I can and I am. You endangered my son and a guest in my home. Consider yourself fortunate I'm not pressing charges. The guards moved forward. Julian tried to resist, but his balance was too compromised. They gripped his arms and half-dragged, half-walked him toward the door. This isn't over, Julian spat at Elias as he was hauled past. You think you've won, But you've lost everything. Remove him, the Duke said coldly. Julian's protests faded down the corridor. When silence returned, the elder Duke surveyed the damage once more, his expression unreadable. Then he looked at Lena. Miss Whitmore, would you give me a moment alone with my son? It wasn't really a question. Lena glanced at Elias, who nodded slightly. She slipped past the Duke, her heart hammering, and waited in the corridor outside. The door closed behind her. She pressed her back against the wall, trying to steady her breathing. Her hands were still shaking from the confrontation, from Julian's violence, from everything that had happened in the last 2 hours. This was supposed to be a quiet birthday, a forgettable day like any other. Instead, it had become, she didn't even know what to call it, a disaster, a revelation, both. Voices filtered through the door, too muffled to make out words, but clear enough to hear tone. The Duke's was measured, controlled. Elias's matched it, firm but respectful. Lena closed her eyes and tried not to imagine what was being said. Tried not to think about the elder Duke convincing Elias he was making a mistake, that she wasn't worth the cost, because maybe she wasn't. The door opened, Lena straightened, her pulse jumping. The elder Duke emerged first. He paused when he saw her, his expression still difficult to read. Miss Whitmore, Your Grace. He studied her for a long moment. My son tells me you tried to convince him to accept my ultimatum, to choose his inheritance over you. Lena's throat tightened. I did. Why? Because he deserves better than to lose everything for someone he barely knows. And yet here you stand. He's stubborn. The ghost of a smile crossed the Duke's face. Yes, he is. The smile faded. Your father's crimes caused significant harm to many people, Miss Whitmore, including this family. I know, and I'm sorry. I can't change what he did, but I'm sorry. Are you aware of the full extent of what he did? Lena hesitated. I know he embezzled, defrauded investors, that people lost money because of him. It was more than money. The Duke's voice was quiet but firm. 3 families lost their homes. A man named Harrison took his own life when his savings disappeared. A woman named Chen had to withdraw her daughter from university. Each word was a knife. I didn't know, Lena whispered. I was 16 when it happened. My mother kept me away from the news, and after they died, I couldn't look at it, couldn't face what he'd done. And now I'll face it. She forced herself to meet his gaze. If you know how to contact those families, I want to help. I don't have much, but whatever I can do, work, payments, anything, I want to try to make it right. The Duke's expression shifted, surprise flickering across his features. You understand that could take years, that you might never fully repay the debt. I understand. And you'd still do it. Yes. He studied her for another long moment. Then he nodded slowly. My son was right about you. Right about what? That you have character. He glanced back toward the library where Elias still waited. Character is rarer than intelligence or beauty or breeding, Miss Whitmore, and far more valuable. Lena didn't know what to say. I'm not giving my blessing, the Duke continued. Not yet. What happened tonight was reckless and damaging, but I'm willing to reconsider my position. You are? On one condition. Lena's stomach nodded. What condition? That you both prove this isn't a momentary infatuation. That it's real. He straightened his jacket. I'll give you 3 months. During that time, Elias will remain heir, but he'll also take on increased responsibilities, managing the estate finances, overseeing the charitable foundation, representing the family publicly. If he can balance those duties while maintaining this relationship, I'll consider the matter settled. And if he can't, then he'll have to choose the title or you. It was still an ultimatum, just a delayed one, but it was also more than Lena had dared hope for. Thank you, she said quietly. The Duke inclined his head slightly. Don't thank me yet. The next 3 months won't be easy, for either of you. He moved toward the stairs, then paused. And Miss Whitmore? The offer to help those families? I'll put you in contact with them. But be prepared. Some may not want your help. Some may never forgive. I know. Good. He descended the stairs, leaving Lena alone in the corridor. A moment later, Elias emerged from the library. His lip had stopped bleeding, but a bruise was already forming along his jaw. "You heard?" he asked. "Some of it. He's giving us a chance. A conditional one." Elias crossed to her, taking her hands. "It's more than I expected. More than we had an hour ago." Lena looked up at him, at this man who'd upended his entire life for her in a single night. "Are you sure about this? Really sure? Are you asking if I'm having second thoughts?" "I'm asking if you understand what you're risking." "I understand perfectly." He lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "And I've never been more certain of anything. The next 3 months are going to be hell. Your father just said—" "I heard what he said. Increased duties, public appearances, proving ourselves." He smiled slightly. "Sounds like a typical Tuesday for me. Only difference is, I'll have you." "You barely have me. We've known each other for a few hours." "Then let's change that." He pulled her closer. "Starting now, tell me something about you. Something real." Lena blinked at the sudden shift. "What?" "If we're doing this, really doing this, I want to know you. Not the society version, not the polished party answers. You." She thought for a moment. "I hate coffee." Elias laughed, surprised. "You work in a cafe." "I know. It's torture. But I can't stand the taste. I've tried every variation. Lattes, cappuccinos, cold brew. All of it tastes like burnt sadness to me." "Burnt sadness?" "That's what it tastes like." He was grinning now, the tension from earlier finally easing. "What do you drink then?" "Hot chocolate, with extra marshmallows. Mrs. Kowalski makes fun of me for it." "I'll remember that." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Your turn. Ask me something." "Do you actually like any of this?" She gestured around at the manor. "The parties, the expectations, the whole Duke thing?" His smile faded into something more thoughtful. "Parts of it. I like the history, the responsibility of maintaining something that's existed for generations. I like the charitable work, using resources to actually help people." He paused. "But the performances, the social games, the constant judgment, I've hated that since I was old enough to understand what it meant." "Then why do it?" "Because until tonight, I didn't think I had a choice." They stood there in the quiet corridor, and Lena realized something had shifted. The desperation from earlier, the fear and chaos, had crystallized into something clearer, something that felt less like a crisis and more like a decision. "I should probably go home," she said, though she made no move to leave. "Probably. It's late, and you have, well, apparently you have a lot of new responsibilities starting tomorrow." "I do." Neither of them moved. "Lena?" "Yeah?" "Would you have dinner with me tomorrow night, somewhere quiet, away from all of this?" She smiled. "That sounds like a date." "It is a date." "Then, yes." The relief on his face was almost comical. "Really? Don't sound so surprised. You literally fought off your cousin and defied your father for me tonight. Dinner seems like the least I can do." "I didn't do it for reciprocation." "I know. That's why I'm saying yes." He kissed her then, soft and slow and full of promise. When they broke apart, both of them were smiling. "Come on," Elias said, taking her hand. "I'll drive you home." "You don't have to." "I want to." They walked through the now empty manor, past the grand hall that had been filled with music and light and judgment just hours ago. The chandeliers were being dimmed by staff, the evidence of the evening packed away. Elias led her to a garage that housed at least a dozen cars. He selected a modest sedan, probably the least expensive vehicle there, though still nicer than anything Lena had ever been in. The drive back to her apartment was quiet, comfortable. Lena watched the city lights blur past, still processing everything that had happened. When they pulled up to her building, Elias put the car in park but didn't turn off the engine. "Thank you," Lena said, "for tonight, for all of it." "Even the disasters?" "Especially those." She reached for the door handle, then paused. "Elias? Yeah? What you said earlier about choosing me. Did you mean it?" "Every word. Even if it costs you everything?" "Especially then." She kissed him quickly before she could overthink it, then climbed out of the car. He waited until she was inside the building before driving away. Lena climbed the stairs to her apartment, her feet aching in the borrowed heels she'd forgotten she was wearing. When she unlocked her door and stepped inside, the familiar space looked different somehow. Smaller, but not in a bad way. She kicked off the heels and sat on the couch, pulling out her phone. 3 missed calls, all from numbers she didn't recognize. Her inbox had 17 new emails. Lena's stomach tightened as she opened the first one. Subject: regarding your father. Miss Whitmore, my name is Rebecca Harrison. My husband, James, lost everything because of your father's schemes. I'm writing to you because... Lena closed the email, her hands shaking. Then she opened it again and forced herself to read the whole thing. Rebecca Harrison wanted to meet, to talk, to understand how Lena could live with what her father had done. The email was angry, but not cruel. Hurt, but not hateful. Lena read it 3 times, then composed a response. Mrs. Harrison, I understand your anger. I understand if you never want to speak to me, but if you're willing, I'd like to meet. I'd like to hear about your husband, and I'd like to help in whatever way I can. I know I can't fix what happened, but I want to try. Lena Whitmore. She sent it before she could second-guess herself. Then she opened the next email, and the next. Some were harsh, some were measured. One simply said, "You have your father's blood. Stay away from our family." Lena read them all, and she responded to each one. It took 2 hours. When she finished, her eyes burned and her chest felt hollow. But she'd done it. She'd faced it. Her phone buzzed with a text. Elias. Home safe. Thank you for tonight. Lena smiled despite her exhaustion. Me. Thank you for making me feel like I mattered. Elias. You do matter. Never doubt that. She set her phone down and looked around her apartment, at the life she'd built from the ruins of her family's disgrace. It wasn't much, but it was hers. And now maybe it could be something more. The next morning, Lena woke to her phone ringing. She grabbed it blindly, her eyes still heavy with sleep. Hello? Miss Whitmore, this is Margaret Ashford. Lena sat up, suddenly wide awake. Mrs. Ashford? I apologize for calling so early, but I wanted to speak with you before the news spreads further. What news? About last night. Victoria has been telling her version of events to anyone who'll listen. It's not favorable. Lena's stomach sank. I see. However, Margaret continued, not everyone is buying her narrative. Several of us who remained after the Exodus have been talking, and we'd like to hear your side. My side? Over lunch, today if you're available. Nothing formal, just a conversation. Lena's mind raced. Why? Because Elias Thornfield is one of the most honorable men I know, and if he's willing to risk everything for you, I'd like to understand why. Margaret paused. Also, I don't particularly care for Victoria Pemberton's sanctimony. She's not as pure as she pretends. Despite everything, Lena almost laughed. Okay, yes, I'll come. Excellent, I'll text you the address. The call ended. Lena stared at her phone, processing. Then she got up and started getting ready. The lunch was at a small bistro on the west side, far from the usual society haunts. Margaret was already there when Lena arrived, along with 2 other women Lena vaguely recognized from the party. Miss Whitmore, Margaret greeted warmly. Thank you for coming. This is Charlotte Reed and Amelia Barnes. Both women smiled. They seemed genuinely kind, not predatory. Please, sit, Charlotte said, gesturing to the empty chair. Lena sat, feeling awkward in her work clothes. She'd come straight from her morning shift. I'll be direct, Margaret said once they'd ordered. Last night was a mess, but I've known Elias since he was a boy, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you. It's been one night, Lena said carefully. Sometimes one night is enough to know. Amelia leaned forward. My husband proposed after 3 days. Everyone said we were insane. We've been married 22 years. Charlotte nodded. What I want to know is, do you care about him? Or is this about getting back into society? The bluntness of it was almost refreshing. I care about him, Lena said, and I don't want to be back in society. Honestly, I'd be happy if none of this had happened and I could just get to know him like a normal person. Margaret smiled. That's what I thought. So what now? Lena asked. Now, Margaret said, we help you navigate the next 3 months, because whether you want it or not, you're going to be scrutinized, judged, torn apart by people who don't even know you. I'm aware. Good. Then you also need to be aware that not everyone is against you. Charlotte pulled out her phone. I've already spoken to 3 other families who were at the party last night. They want to give you a chance. Lena felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. Really? Really? Amelia squeezed her hand. You're not alone in this, dear, and neither is Elias. For the first time since the previous night's chaos, Lena felt something that might have been hope. They spent the next hour talking strategy, how to handle press inquiries, which events to attend, how to present herself without seeming like she was trying too hard. When lunch ended, Margaret walked Lena to the door. One more thing, she said quietly. Victoria is going to try to destroy you. She's already started. Don't underestimate her. I won't. And don't let her win by making you doubt yourself. You deserve to be happy, Miss Whitmore. We all do. Lena hugged her impulsively. Margaret hugged back. Outside, the afternoon sun was bright and cold. Lena pulled her coat tighter and started the walk to the bus stop. Her phone buzzed. Elias. Still on for tonight? Me. Absolutely. Where are we going? Elias. Somewhere with excellent hot chocolate. Lena grinned. Me. Perfect. And for the first time in years, her birthday had given her something worth celebrating. The restaurant Elias chose was tucked away on a side street Lena had walked past 100 times without noticing. Small, warm, with mismatched chairs and fairy lights strung across exposed brick walls. The kind of place that didn't care about reservations or dress codes. Lena arrived first, her nerves buzzing. She'd changed 3 times before settling on jeans and a sweater. Nothing fancy, because Elias had said somewhere quiet, and she was taking him at his word. He walked in 10 minutes later, wearing dark slacks and a simple button-down, no tie. When he spotted her, his whole face softened. You're early, he said, sliding into the seat across from her. So are you. I didn't want to risk being late. A server appeared with menus, and they ordered soup for her, pasta for him, and yes, hot chocolate with extra marshmallows. When the server left, Elias reached across the table and took her hand. How was your day? He asked. Surreal, Lena admitted. I had lunch with Margaret Ashford and 2 other women from last night. They want to help. Elias's eyebrows rose. Margaret called you? This morning. She said not everyone believes Victoria's version of events. They shouldn't. Victoria's version is poison dressed up as concern. Lena squeezed his hand. How was yours? Long. My father had me sit through 4 hours of estate meetings. I think he was testing whether I'd actually follow through on his conditions. And? I made it through without falling asleep or walking out. Barely. She smiled. That's progress. Their food arrived, and they ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then Elias set down his fork and looked at her seriously. Lena, I need to tell you something. Her stomach tightened. Okay. I got a call from Victoria today. Lena's grip on her spoon tightened. What did she want? To apologize, allegedly, but it felt more like a threat. He paused. She said she'd be willing to publicly retract her statements about last night if I ended things with you. The words hit like ice water. What did you say? Lena asked quietly. I told her to go to hell. Relief flooded through her, but it was followed quickly by worry. Elias, if she's actively working against us, then we deal with it, together. He leaned forward. I'm not letting her manipulate me. Or you. She had her chance years ago to be something real, and she chose to be a chess piece in her family's social games instead. Lena wanted to believe it was that simple, but she knew better. She's going to make this harder than it needs to be, she said. Probably. But she's also underestimating you. He smiled slightly. Big mistake. Over the next 2 weeks, Lena learned exactly what Elias meant. Victoria launched a quiet but vicious campaign, whispers at charity events, carefully worded comments to journalists, social media posts that never mentioned Lena by name but made it clear who they were about. Some people will do anything for a second chance at relevance. Interesting how quickly certain names resurface when there's money involved. Always tragic when good men are deceived by pretty faces and sob stories. Each one stung. But Lena had made a promise to herself the night of the party. She wouldn't hide. She wouldn't run. So when Margaret invited her to a charity luncheon, Lena went. When Charlotte asked her to volunteer at a community center fundraiser, Lena showed up. When Amelia suggested she attend a gallery opening where Victoria would definitely be present, Lena walked in with her head high. Victoria was holding court near the wine table when Lena arrived. Their eyes met across the room, and for a moment, Victoria's mask slipped, just enough for Lena to see the genuine fury beneath the practiced smile. Then Victoria turned back to her audience and continued whatever story she'd been telling, her laughter bright and cold. Lena didn't approach her, didn't engage. She simply moved through the gallery, looking at the art, talking to the people Margaret introduced her to, existing in the same space without flinching. It was Margaret who later pulled her aside, her expression thoughtful. "You're handling this well," she said. "I'm terrified," Lena admitted. "Good. Fear keeps you sharp. But you're not letting it control you. That's the difference." Margaret squeezed her arm. "Victoria expected you to crumble. She's realizing you won't, and that's making her sloppy." "Sloppy how?" "She's pushing too hard, making it too obvious. People are starting to notice." Margaret's smile was knowing. Give it time. Time, it turned out, was exactly what Lena needed. 3 weeks after the party, Rebecca Harrison, the woman whose husband had died because of Lena's father, agreed to meet. They met at a coffee shop, neutral territory. Rebecca was in her 60s, gray-haired and thin, with eyes that had seen too much loss. Lena's hands shook as she sat down across from her. "Thank you for coming," Lena said quietly. Rebecca studied her for a long moment. "I almost didn't." "I understand." "Do you?" Rebecca's voice was sharp but not unkind. "Do you understand what it's like to lose everything? To watch someone you love give up because they can't see a way forward?" Lena's throat tightened. "I lost both my parents. I know it's not the same as what you went through, but I understand loss. Your father chose his path. My husband didn't. You're right, and I'm sorry. I know that doesn't change anything, but I am." Rebecca's expression softened slightly. "You were just a child when it happened." "I was, but I benefited from what he did. I lived in that house, went to those schools, wore those clothes, all of it paid for with stolen money." Lena forced herself to meet Rebecca's eyes. "I can't give you back what was taken, but I want to try to help, however I can." "Why?" "Because it's the right thing to do, and because I can't move forward knowing I never tried to make amends." Rebecca was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "My daughter had to drop out of university. She's working 2 jobs now, trying to save enough to go back." "What's her name?" "Sophie." "I'd like to help with her tuition, if you'll let me." Rebecca's eyes widened. "You can't afford that." "Not all at once, but I can make payments. I can work extra shifts. I can—" "Why would you do that?" "Because your husband deserved better. Because Sophie deserves a chance to finish what she started." Lena's voice cracked. "Because I can't undo what my father did, but I can at least try to undo some of the damage." Rebecca's composure crumbled. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she covered her mouth with her hand. Lena waited, her own eyes burning. "You're serious," Rebecca whispered. "Completely. That could take years." "I know." Rebecca wiped her eyes, her hands trembling. "I hated you. When I heard you were at that party, living it up with the elite like nothing had happened, I hated you. I don't blame you, but you're not what I expected." Rebecca's voice was thick with emotion. "You're not your father." "I'm trying not to be." They talked for 2 hours. Rebecca told Lena about James, his kindness, his dreams, the way he'd loved gardening, and terrible puns. She showed Lena pictures of Sophie, bright-eyed and hopeful before everything fell apart. And Lena listened, really listened. When they parted, Rebecca hugged her. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for caring enough to try." That night, Lena told Elias about the meeting. They were in his apartment, smaller than the manor, modern and minimalist, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He'd made dinner, which had been an adventure since he'd admitted he barely knew how to cook. "She's going to let you help?" Elias asked, setting down his wine glass. "She said she'd think about it, but I think she will." Lena curled into the couch beside him. "I met with 2 other families this week, too. One of them slammed the door in my face. The other listened but didn't commit to anything. That's progress." "It doesn't feel like enough." Elias pulled her closer. "You're taking responsibility for something that wasn't your fault. That's more than most people would do. It's the least I can do. It's extraordinary. He kissed the top of her head. You're extraordinary. Lena tilted her face up to look at him. You're biased. Completely. Doesn't make it less true. She kissed him, slow and sweet, and for a moment everything else faded. Then her phone buzzed. She groaned and checked it. Margaret, turn on channel 7, now. Lena's stomach dropped. She grabbed the remote and switched on the TV. A news anchor was mid-sentence. Allegations surfacing tonight about Duke Elias Thornfield and his relationship with Lena Whitmore, daughter of convicted fraudster Robert Whitmore. Lena's blood went cold. The segment cut to an interview with Victoria Pemberton, looking poised and sympathetic. I just think people deserve to know the truth, Victoria was saying. Elias is a good man, but he's being manipulated by someone with a very troubling past. Her family destroyed lives, and now she's wormed her way back into society using him. That's not, Lena started, but Elias squeezed her hand. Wait, he said quietly. The anchor came back on screen. We reached out to Miss Whitmore for comment, but she declined. However, we did speak with several members of the community who had a different perspective. The screen cut to Margaret Ashford, sitting in what looked like her living room. I've known Elias Thornfield for over 2 decades, Margaret said firmly, and I've never seen him happier or more himself than he's been these past few weeks. Miss Whitmore is not manipulating anyone. She's a thoughtful, compassionate young woman who's trying to make amends for her father's crimes, which, I might add, she had no part in. The segment cut to Charlotte Reed next. Victoria Pemberton has been pushing this narrative because she's bitter that Elias chose someone else. But her vendetta is revealing more about her character than Miss Whitmore's. Then Amelia Barnes. Lena Whitmore has shown more grace under pressure than most people I know. She's attending events, meeting with affected families, trying to help. That's not the behavior of a manipulator. That's the behavior of someone with integrity. The segment ended with the anchor looking thoughtful. It seems this story is more complicated than initial reports suggested. We'll continue to follow developments. Lena stared at the screen, stunned. They defended me, she whispered. Of course they did. Elias was smiling. I told you, you're not alone in this. Her phone exploded with messages. Margaret, you're welcome. Charlotte, Victoria's face right now is priceless. Amelia, dinner tomorrow? We should celebrate. Lena laughed, tears streaming down her face. I can't believe they did that. Believe it. Elias wiped her tears away gently. You've earned their loyalty, their trust. This is just them returning what you've given them. 2 months into the Elder Duke's probationary period, something shifted. Victoria's campaign had backfired. The more she pushed, the more people rallied around Lena. Families who'd been on the fence started reaching out. Invitations arrived. Slowly, grudgingly, Lena began to be accepted. Not as Robert Whitmore's daughter, but as herself. She still worked at the cafe, still lived in her tiny apartment, but now she also attended charity functions with Elias, volunteered at community centers, and met regularly with the families her father had hurt. Sophie Harrison enrolled back in university, her tuition covered by a payment plan Lena and Elias had worked out together. The Chen family accepted Lena's apology and her offer to help fund their daughter's education. Even the man who'd slammed the door in her face eventually came around, inviting her to a family dinner where they talked for hours about forgiveness and moving forward. And through it all, Elias was there. Not hovering, not controlling, just present. A steady hand when she faltered, a quiet encouragement when she doubted. They fought sometimes, about stupid things like whose turn it was to pick a movie, or serious things, like whether Lena was taking on too much trying to help everyone at once. But they always came back to each other. The night before the 3-month deadline, Lena couldn't sleep. She lay in Elias's bed. She'd been staying there more often than not, staring at the ceiling. You're thinking too loud, Elias mumbled beside her. Sorry. He rolled over, propping himself up on one elbow. What's wrong? Tomorrow your father decides whether this was real or not. It's real. But what if he doesn't think so? What if he decides you haven't proven yourself? Elias was quiet for a moment. Then he said, if he does, then we figure it out. We find another way. You'd really give up the title? Lena, I'd give up anything for you. I thought you knew that by now. She turned to face him, her heart aching. I love you. It was the first time either of them had said it out loud. Elias's breath caught. Say that again. I love you. He kissed her, deep and desperate and full of everything words couldn't hold. I love you too, he said against her lips. So much it scares me. Me too. They stayed awake talking until dawn, making plans and promises, and pretending tomorrow wasn't coming. But it came anyway. The elder Duke of Blackridge summoned them both to his study at noon. Lena wore a simple dress, her hands clammy with nerves. Elias held one of them as they walked through the manor corridors. The Duke was standing by the window when they entered, his posture rigid. Sit, he said without turning. They sat. The Duke finally turned to face them, his expression unreadable. 3 months ago I gave you both an ultimatum, he said. I told Elias he had to prove this relationship was real while maintaining his responsibilities to this family. Lena's heart hammered. I've watched closely. I've received reports from estate managers, charity directors, family advisors. He paused. And I've listened to the people in this community, both those who support you and those who don't. And? Elias asked quietly. The Duke's expression softened, just barely. You've exceeded my expectations. Lena's breath rushed out. The estate finances are in better shape than they've been in years. The charitable foundation has expanded its reach significantly. And you've represented this family with more integrity than I've seen from you in a long time. He looked at Lena. You, Miss Whitmore, have shown remarkable character. The work you've done to make amends, the families you've helped, the responsibility you've taken, that speaks volumes. Thank you, Lena managed. I'm not finished. The Duke moved to his desk and pulled out a folder. I've had my lawyers draw up new estate documents. They formalize your position as heir, Elias, with no further conditions. Elias stood slowly. You're reinstating me? I'm acknowledging that you never needed reinstatement. You were always the right choice. He extended the folder. Sign these, and it's official. Elias took the folder, his hands shaking slightly. The Duke turned to Lena. As for you, Miss Whitmore, I owe you an apology. Lena's eyes widened. You don't? I do. I judged you based on your father's crimes. I tried to use you as leverage against my son. That was wrong. He straightened. If Elias chooses to marry you, you'll have my full support. The room spun. Did you just? Elias started. I did. The Duke's mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. Don't make me say it again. Elias laughed, actually laughed, and pulled Lena to her feet, spinning her around. We did it, he said, his voice thick with emotion. We actually did it. Lena was crying and laughing at the same time, clinging to him. The Duke cleared his throat. I'll give you both a moment. He left, closing the door behind him. Elias set Lena down but didn't let go, his forehead pressed to hers. Marry me, he said. Lena's breath caught. What? Marry me. Not because my father gave his blessing, not because society expects it, because I can't imagine my life without you in it. Elias, look, you don't have to answer now. I don't even have a ring. I needed you to know. This is what I want. You are what I want. Lena cupped his face in her hands. Yes. Yes? Yes, I'll marry you, you idiot. He kissed her then, and it tasted like joy and relief and the beginning of everything they'd fought for. 6 months later, Lena stood in a small garden behind Blackridge Manor, wearing a simple white dress and holding a bouquet of wildflowers. The guest list was small. Margaret, Charlotte, Amelia, Rebecca Harrison, and her daughter Sophie, the Chen family, a handful of Elias's closest friends, and the elder Duke, who'd insisted on walking Lena down the aisle since her own father couldn't. Ready? The Duke asked quietly. Lena nodded, too emotional to speak. They walked together toward the flower-covered archway where Elias waited, looking at her like she was the only person in the world. The ceremony was short and perfect. No grand pronouncements, no elaborate performances, just two people promising to choose each other, every day, for the rest of their lives. When Elias kissed her, their small audience erupted in cheers. At the reception, Margaret cornered Lena near the dessert table. I knew from the first night, she said, her eyes twinkling. The way he looked at you, like he'd found something he didn't know he'd been missing. I was terrified that night, Lena admitted. Of course you were. But you stayed anyway. That's what mattered. Charlotte and Amelia joined them, raising their glasses. To the woman who proved Victoria Pemberton wrong, Charlotte said. To the woman who taught us all what real grace looks like, Amelia added. They toasted and Lena felt overwhelmed by gratitude. Later, as the sun set and fairy lights twinkled overhead, Lena found herself alone with Elias on the same balcony where they'd shared their first kiss. Do you ever think about that night? She asked. The party? Every day, Elias said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Best decision I ever made. Throwing a party? Choosing you. Lena leaned back against him, watching the stars emerge. Your father asked me something yesterday. What? He asked if I'd consider working with the charitable foundation. Officially. He said they could use someone with my perspective. Elias turned her around to face him. What did you say? I said yes. She smiled. I figured if I'm going to be a duchess eventually, I might as well do something useful with it. You're already doing something useful. You've helped 6 families rebuild their lives. 7, actually. The Morrison family reached out last week. Pride shone in Elias's eyes. See? Extraordinary. You keep saying that because it keeps being true. They swayed together to the distant music, and Lena thought about how much had changed since her 20th birthday. She'd gone from invisible to seen, from alone to surrounded by people who cared, from running from her past to facing it head-on and finding a way forward. And she'd found him, this impossible, stubborn, wonderful man who'd looked at her that night and decided she was worth fighting for. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For noticing me, for choosing me, for making me believe I deserved to be chosen. Elias cupped her face gently. You always deserved it, Lena. I just helped you see it. Years later, when people asked Lena about her love story, she'd think back to that quiet morning when she'd woken up expecting nothing. She'd think about the invitation that changed everything. The party that fell apart and came together in the same night. The man who stood in front of everyone and declared she mattered. She'd think about the fights they weathered, the judgments they endured, the way they learned each other slowly, imperfectly, but completely. And she'd smile and say, it started with a birthday I thought no one would remember. And it became the day I learned that being seen, really seen, by the right person changes everything. Because that night at Blackridge Manor hadn't just been a party. It had been the moment Lena Whitmore stopped being invisible and started being loved. And that made all the difference.